I was alone in my apartment, and God spoke to me, and He didn't have to say, "This is God." I knew it was the Lord. And all He said was, "Now's the time to think
Mm.
about it." And I felt like it's so strange. I felt like my head was open and He could see inside my head.
Welcome to When She Serves, thoughtful conversations that encourage and equip women who serve Christ and seek to lead well. We're so glad you're here. Hi, everybody. Welcome. And today we have Leona Karni, and I'm really excited to interview her, to get to know her better. We met briefly at the CGN conference about a year ago. And you stood out, Leona, because of how long you've been in the mission field and what you have done as mission, and as a missionary and as missions all around the world. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's such a blessing. So could you start by telling us, how did you get started in missions? And maybe even before that, share a little bit about your testimony leading up to that, because we all have a testimony leading into what the Lord calls us to. Can you share a little bit about that?
When I was 9 years old, my mother took us to a Presbyterian church, and a missionary couple was there. They gave the man, when he was speaking, gave an altar call. What is really interesting about them, though, is that the woman was so kind and made me feel loved and accepted. And generally, I felt like the alcoholics' kids in church because that's what I was. And everybody else they were complete families.
Wow.
So it was very, very special. Anyway, when he asked if anyone wanted to accept the Lord, I raised my hand. And I remember that I was laughing and crying at the same time. And I didn't know what happened. And because I was only 9 years old, no one bothered to explain anything to me. But I had an interest from that, I would say at that moment, I think, to be a missionary and to teach the Bible. And I used to make up Bible lessons and go to the church and sit on this log behind the church and teach Bible studies to nobody. Then when I became a teenager, I was looking to people instead of to God, and I was very disappointed, and I walked away from the church. I was very anti-Christ. You couldn't even say the name Jesus around me. But the Lord is faithful, and over the years, I had a lot of tragedies which led me to try to escape at a time when drugs were very common and hitchhiking was very common. So I was hitchhiking in California, which is where I lived at the time. And every day, someone from Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa picked me up every single day. This is no exaggeration.
Wow.
One day I came running into my neighbor's house. She was a friend. I came running into her house and I said, "These Jesus freaks are taking over the world." And she just started laughing. I said, "Seriously, hitchhike with me up to the mall. I guarantee you Jesus freaks will pick us up." And sure enough, she went with me, and sure enough, they picked us up. I was a Buddhist at the time, or practicing as much as I could in the United States, a Buddhist. And so all these people were nice to me that picked me up. So, of course, I need to make sure my karma is clean. And I used to tell them when I would get out of the car, "I'll think about that sometime." But I was lying to keep my karma clean because I had no intention of thinking about it. And after about a year of that, I was alone in my apartment, and God spoke to me, and He didn't have to say, "This is God." I knew it was the Lord. And all He said was, "Now's the time to think about it." And I felt like it's so strange. I felt like my head was open and He could see inside my head. And I said, I guess I should pray. And then I realized I don't know how to pray. So I went to, this is back in the day with landlines. I went to the phone, called information, got the phone number of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, called the church, and I told the receptionist, I would like to pray. Could you please tell me how to address him?
Wow.
And she said, he knows all about you. He's known all about you since before you were born. Now, God's looking in my head and she's telling me he knows all about me. I said, I know that. Just please tell me how to address him. And she said, well, you're just calling Father. And she was going to continue to talk. I'm sure she was going to invite me to church or something, but I just hung up. And I got the first syllable out, Fa. And that same thing happened. I was laughing and crying. And it was faintly familiar, but
I
I
was going to
didn't
ask
know
you,
what it was.
did it remind you of when you were 9 years old?
Just faintly familiar, but I couldn't pinpoint why. It was the Lord did a lot of transformation before I fully understood what happened.
Wow. So, how did it then shift to missions, or what was the next step? Because there's always a next step, right?
I became very involved with Kay Smith's Bible studies. Actually, before that, at that time, I was married to an Israeli,
Mm.
and he had studied to be a rabbi. So when this started happening, I decided I had to determine if Jesus was the Messiah or not. So I started studying the Bible in Hebrew, and I told my husband, see, if Jesus is the Messiah, then I can know it from the Bible,
Yeah.
from the Jewish Bible. And so after a year of studying word for word, checking the Hebrew to the English, a minimum of 4 hours a day, no exaggeration, I just became obsessed. And I had my rules. I would only ask the rabbi or I would ask my husband. I wouldn't ask Christians because they'd only try to influence me. So after a year, I came to the redemption of the firstborn in Exodus.
Mhm.
And it says, the firstborn of a lamb is redeemed with the lamb. The firstborn of an ox is redeemed with an ox. And a little bit further, it says, the firstborn of a jackass is redeemed with the lamb. And if you don't want to redeem it, break its neck. And I thought, why is that different? Everything else is
Yeah.
redeemed with itself. So I called the rabbi, asked the question, and he said, because a jackass is an unclean animal. It cannot be offered for sacrifice. So I hung up the phone, and it was like this. I recognize now it was the Spirit of the Lord, but I didn't know what it just came on me so peaceful. And the question that was being asked was, it was like I was asking it, but it was like the question was outside of me too.
Mm.
And the question was, do you mean that this God that I know would make provision for unclean people? I mean, unclean animals, and he wouldn't make provision for unclean people?
Mm.
And I don't know how long I thought about that until it just welled up inside of me. And I said, no, the only provision I know he made was Jesus. So he has to be the Messiah.
Yeah.
So I have to laugh when I think about it because I'm probably the only person that I know of anyway who came to the Lord through a jackass.
Well, we know he spoke through one, right? As
Yeah,
well.
he certainly did. But then the call to missions was another process
Yeah. Tell me
to
about
go into.
that.
Well, it started, but I didn't realize that it started. Uh, one summer when I was driving with my daughter, I was still married, driving with my daughter, and I stopped at a roadside rest in Louisiana. I was driving from California back east. And when I pulled into the rest area where they have the places to have picnics or whatever, this woman got up like she was going to meet me. And I thought, I don't know anybody here. And so I went on my walk, which was my purpose for stopping. I needed to stretch my legs. And my daughter sat and talked to the woman. So when I came back, she invited us to have dinner with her. And she said to me, I live very close by here. And I was beginning to prepare my dinner. And the Lord told me to take it to the roadside rest because I had a divine appointment. When you pulled in, the Lord told me that's your appointment. She said, the message to you is that you're going to be in missions. You're
Wow.
going to be involved with children. And I said, is she going to go with me, my daughter? And she looked and she said, in the beginning, but she won't stay with you.
Wow.
And you know something? I can share that with you now because I just remembered it when I was driving through Louisiana, moving from Las Vegas to Florida 4 months ago.
You had this
Yeah,
divine prophetic word spoken over you, both exciting, I imagine, and sad and scary, because to go out as a missionary is exciting and scary. We've been there, my family and I, but also knowing that you might be doing this alone is hard. So how long ago was that? How long has this mission journey been for you? And of course, we want to know all the things in our short amount of time that you can tell us that you've been doing.
from the time that she spoke that, it was probably a year or so later. I can't remember. So that would have probably been around 1977. And at that time, I was very involved with the Friday morning Bible studies. In fact, Kay Smith is the one who prayed for me and sent me out because Calvary Chapel didn't even have a missions pastor or a missions fellowship at that time. They were new. We were still new. What happened was I started having this idea, I guess, this thought about moving to this town called Chestertown, Maryland, where there's a Bible college. Not a Bible college, a college.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, that was my first, for 2 years I was there, and the Lord was building my faith then. But that just started with a thought. But while I was there, after I was there for a year, the Lord started speaking to me to buy a house. Now, this is back in the day. It's probably 79, 80, 79 probably. At those times, you didn't need a minimum for a checking account. And I had a checking account. It's a good thing you didn't need a minimum. And the Lord started speaking to me to buy a house. And I had been recovering from surgery. So my income at that point was Social Security disability, which isn't much higher than welfare. And I was doing this ministry with the college kids. I ended up laying the foundation for a church plant there. The church is still there, Calvary Chapel, Chestertown, Maryland. Anyway, and God's speaking to me, buy this house. So I thought, I don't know how to buy a house. Husbands buy houses. I don't even know what to do to buy a house, and I have no money. So I thought, well, I guess I should pretend that I'm going to buy a house, meet with a realtor, see what every step is, and then I'll know how to pray effectively. So I called a realtor, went and looked at a house, walked through it in 5 minutes. I was very careful with what I said, so I wasn't lying. I said, I think I could be interested in this house. He was very enthusiastic and said, well, we have to go back to the office. So I went with him back to the office. And I filled out the forms, and then he came to take me to the head realtor's desk. As I was halfway to my seat to sit down at his desk, the Lord spoke to me, and he said, I've prepared this house for you. And I'm thinking, I didn't even look at it. And I was in so much surprise at what the Lord just spoke that when that realtor said to me, how much money are you prepared to put down on this house? I thought, I have $1.56 or 86, I can't remember, cents in my checking account. I better leave 56 cents in there. And I looked at him and said, I can write a check for $1. And he just looked at me, and he must have been thinking I had the money tied up in stocks and bonds or something. And he said, okay, you can make a check. You can make a contract binding with $1. So then I went over to the house every day, and I walked the property line. And I said, and it was a big house, and it was a big yard. And, I forgot to tell you something very important. So the realtor told me this house has been restored by the city. So you need to be approved by the city also. So he gave me the city office number. I went over to the city, saw the guy. He looked at my forms, my application. He said, you'll never be approved for a loan.
Mm.
But if you're approved for a loan, we'll give you the house. So I called the bank. They told me, don't even bother to come in. You don't have enough annual income. The Lord told me to go. They had to process my application, so I went. And then every day I started walking the property line. And I'd say, every place that my foot treads, I claim in the name of Jesus
Wow.
Christ, just like the children of Israel.
Yeah.
One day I'm sitting in the driveway and I'm thinking, "Man, this yard is big. It's got trees. I need rakes. I need a lawnmower. Where am I going to get the money for that? Where am I going to put them? I need a shed. I don't have any money for a shed. Never prayed about it. Okay. 6 weeks to the day that I applied for the loan, the bank called me and told me my loan was approved.
Yeah.
To this day, I don't know how. I have no idea. I think the Lord did something with the computer. So I called the city and told him my loan was approved. And he said, oh, great. We just had a shed built for that house. So it'll be delivered on Tuesday.
No. Wow.
It gets better. So when you go to closing, he said, I'll call you and let you know where and when closing is. Well, when you go to closing, that's when you have to have the big money. I still had no money. I think I may have still had the 56 cents. So he called to tell me about the closing. And he said, by the way, we received federal funding to restore that house. And there was money left over from it, and it has to go on that house. So we're going to pay your closing.
It just keeps
So
getting
then
better. It just keeps
we go to
getting better.
closing. I know. We go to closing. Here's this check for $1. The realtor didn't want it. The city didn't want it. The bank didn't want it. So they gave it back to me, and I have it in a frame hanging on a wall.
Wow. That is such an amazing story. As I listen to it, I'm thinking that is such the training ground for missions, though, right? Because
Yep.
what you need as a missionary is to learn how to trust in God in all things, for all things, even when things seem crazy, when things seem impossible. That's when the faith, right? That's when the faith that God is going to get me. He's going to see me through. He's going to provide. And look what he did in this amazing story of your house. I'm sure one of many stories over the many years, but such a training, I see it just a training ground of makes things maybe a little bit easier going forward. You can look back and be like, look what he did. Look what he did then. There's nothing you could have done. You had $1. That doesn't happen. The city, all of that. So as we look forward then, as you continue into missions, can you tell us then how it grew, where you've been over the world, things that you've done?
Well, I was in Maryland then. I was in that house for a year, and I sold the house. When the Lord spoke to me to go into foreign missions, I sold the house, and the proceeds supported me for 1 year on the field, which was kind of neat. I served in Israel for a while, but there was a lot going on with me because I had come to the Lord through study and to convert to Judaism. I was married to an Israeli. I had an Israeli family. So there was a lot that needed to be settled.
Yeah.
And I think he used that time to settle it. And then he led me after a year to YWAM Holland, where I did their DTS program. And the Lord really worked powerfully in my life during that time. And at that time, he called me to Thailand through visions during prayer, very clear visions, which later, when I was in Thailand, I saw and experienced the visions that I had in Holland. So he called me to Thailand to work with children that were being sold into slavery. And I served in Thailand for 11 and a half years. I founded an organization that still runs, actually. And during those 11 and a half years, I did short-term missions in other countries as I was training staff and training people to take over. Then I would, I went to Liberia for 3 months, I think, and came back during that time.
Where are you serving now?
Right now, what I'm working on, I'm based in Bradenton, Florida. since November, and I am working on a project to start a Bible school in the Peruvian jungle. And I am also working to network throughout South America teams of women who will intercede for every pastor and every church in their country.
Wow. So
And
you haven't slowed down much in your
no,
80s. You're still going, which is amazing to me because you're still praying, hands open, flexible heart, flexible life, saying, "Lord, here I am, send me." And he hasn't stopped using you. He hasn't stopped sending you.
no, I don't think he ever will. I pray that he never does, because the greatest joy in my life is being used of the Lord. Nothing can compare to that.
What kind of advice and wisdom then would you pass on to some of us, me, myself, the women listening to the podcast of continuing to answer in the call? Because, we get discouraged. We get comfortable. We might do things, go out in the field, come back and think that's over. There might be, there's different seasons for things. So how do you keep going in maybe seasons of doubt, seasons of maybe not hearing as strongly and still wanting to answer the call?
I think the most important thing is to remember, this might sound silly, to remember that whatever it is that you're feeling or going through, it's no surprise to the Lord. It's not a surprise to him. It may surprise you. And he has his purposes in it, or he would not allow it. When you're preparing to go to missions, when he's put something on your heart, I think hold on to it. Pastor Chuck used to say, don't forget in the dark what was revealed to you in the light.
Yes, it's so good. It's so good. How then it brings up a different question. I've heard a lot of women ask me this and ask just different people in ministry and leadership and missions. A lot of women want to know, how do you discern the voice of God when he's calling you to these things and on to the next place? I know for some people, they look for these huge, you know, billboard signs. And I don't think necessarily that's what's needed. If we're told to go, we go. But some people really struggle with how to take that next step. How would you advise them in that?
I think the struggle is because of the lack in our relationship with the Lord.
Mm.
It's a lack of trust. He's greater than any mistake you can make. I mean, if you move forward in something that you believe the Lord's leading you in, and you find out later that it was just yourself being led, God will use that. I'm
Amen.
not afraid of that.
Mm.
I would rather that than to miss out on an opportunity to have an adventure with the Lord.
Exactly. That's what I was just thinking. It's an adventure. This is what we tell people. It's not a hard doom kind of thing to be a Christian. Some people look at it as you can't do this, you have to do this, but it's such a adventure in Christ to be able to serve in these ways. And exactly what you said, you might not step exactly the right way, but God will use it. Because where are your eyes focused? You're focused on the Lord to bring him joy, to glorify him, and to bring people to him. That honors God. And he will use that step, right, to the next step, all kind of building blocks. And to see that
He
in
uses
your life, it's
everything.
amazing. Yeah. I have a question regarding kind of all these countries you've been in. And just if you've seen it, I'm just wondering, each country kind of has a stronghold, I think, of the enemy. He kind of puts things in over the countries in a way. Like for the United States, I think there's a lot of comfort here for people. And so it's hard for them to step out. The enemy kind of uses that to keep people ineffective, but it's different in different countries. The enemy has different tactics in these different countries to keep people ineffective from stepping out. Have you seen that to be true? What have you noticed in that?
I, are you referring to Christians, keeping Christians from stepping out?
Yeah, Christians, like the Christian
Yeah.
community from stepping out and maybe going out and taking big steps of faith.
I can't say that I've seen strongholds unless you consider maybe culturally. For the culture, it's against their culture or even their churches. Sometimes a church will be, especially some of the European churches, can be very structured and have a very structured way about missions.
Yeah.
And that can be intimidating for someone who wants to go out into missions and the Lord's not leading them to do so within that structure.
Mm,
I would say culture and
culture.
the culture of the country, the culture of the church,
Yeah, that makes
perhaps.
sense. Yeah, not so easy to pinpoint, I guess. Um, as you look towards the future, you're planning things. You have, like you said, wanting to start this Bible college in the Peruvian rainforest, gather the women of South America to pray for the missions, the pastors, the churches. So you're not stopping. You're looking forward. But I heard as well that you have also authored some books.
Oh, yeah, I have, um, I think 8 books now.
Wow.
The It's so wonderful to journey with the Lord as He unfolds gifts that you never knew you had.
Um,
You know, my testimony, or part of my testimony, because it wasn't complete when I wrote the book, uh, was published under the title "Chosen in Love," and that I finished writing that in 2005. At which time I thought I was retiring. So the book concludes with me retiring.
where were you in the world when you thought you were retiring all those years ago?
I I was back in the States. This is interesting. There was a young girl when I was in Chestertown, Maryland, that I led to the Lord, and she was in high school. She, of course, in 2005, was a grown woman, and she started a ministry called Women in Need.
Mm.
And she asked me to make a commitment for a year and help administratively because I have some educational background in organizational management. So she wanted me to help them, get structured,
Mhm.
get organized. So for 1 year, I was doing that and I was writing the book at the same time. And when I finished the book, I finished my commitment to win and I was retiring, I thought. Surprise, surprise. That was how many years ago? 26 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah.
20 years ago.
Yeah. Wow. I love that your testimony, when you were sharing it earlier, I was thinking about how amazing it is that your testimony has so many different parts that can speak to so many different people, right? You have the Jesus revolution, the hippie, the drug aspect of it, of, walking away, being kind of against Christ for a while, being a Buddhist, and then your Israeli husband. And there's all of these different dynamics that you went through that is just so amazing because it's so far reaching. You're able to really be relevant to a lot of people in the things that God had you go through.
The Lord has used it a lot with especially young women, even now, even to date, when He had me. There's several young women that I am mentoring or counseling, however you want to call it. And it's exciting. It's a blessing
Yeah.
that when the Lord led me to, you didn't ask this. I don't know why I'm thinking about it. Living in the States, is that what you said? I When the Lord led me to move to Bradenton, He did so at that conference where I met you.
Oh, yeah.
Was speaking to me at every time there was a worship. You know how each session starts with worship?
Mm.
Every worship time, He was telling me, move to Florida, move to Florida. And I'm on the board of Calvary Chapel Bible Colleges, and the main campus had just moved to
Yeah.
Bradenton, Florida. So
Mhm.
that's the only thing that I could conclude from that. But I didn't want to go to Florida. I didn't want to. I did not. And so when I came back from the conference, I was scrubbing my floor and I was complaining to the Lord. He said, what am I going to do in Florida? And how am I going to find a place to live? And how much is that going to cost me? And then I got really not nice. And I said, and I don't want to live in an apartment anymore. I want to live in a house. And the Lord spoke to me just like it was so strong. If it wouldn't have been so strong, I wouldn't have done this. He said, go call Rex, my son-in-law. Ask him if he wants to buy a house for an investment and you'll rent it. And I just automatically went and called Rex. And he said, well, I'd have to pray about that. The next day after praying, he called me and he was all excited. That made one of us. Anyway, all that to say, when I moved here, it wasn't with great joy. I was not rejoicing. And I wasn't here 3 weeks. It was about 2.5 weeks when I had invited the college kids and for a meal, and I wanted to light candles and I didn't have matches. So I was going to get my mail and I saw the neighbor and his friend walking to their house. And I went running up to him and I said, this is going to sound really crazy. I'm your neighbor across the street. Do you have any matches I can borrow?
Mm-hmm.
I talked to him for maybe 3 minutes about matches, as far as I can remember. About 4 days later, he came to the house with his girlfriend. I thought, well, that's nice. They're visiting me. They sat down. He straightened himself up and he said, well, the purpose of our visit is to ask you if you would teach us the Bible. They just got baptized on Wednesday night.
No, wow.
The Lord definitely confirmed. And he one day told me, I believe the Lord moved you here into this house for me.
Yeah. And it can be just like that, just for the one, right? If our focus is correct, it's for the one. I think people need to remind themselves of that. Having large quantities of people, it's great, but really, Jesus went after the one, and that should be our hearts as well. And look at the life that you touched there. I love that you shared that story, Leona, especially as you were praying before, not wanting to go, questioning, like, how are we going to do this? To me, and I think probably people listening, it's refreshing to hear that who have been in ministry and missions, who have known God's provision and seen it, and you still are a real person in all this. You still
Sure.
do what we do. It's like, Lord, I don't want to do this. Lord, I don't know. How are we going to do that? All of these things that naturally come up. So for me, I just say thank you that you shared the realness of that, because that's what a lot of us think sometimes. And then look what the Lord did. You went, you served, you are serving, and what a blessing. Before we end, I just wanted to ask, where can we find your books? Where are they, if we want to buy them, where are they being sold?
They're on Amazon.
All on Amazon? Okay,
Yeah.
So you can find them Amazon. Look for Leona Karni. Do you want to spell your name for us so we can try and find this?
Leona, Leona, Karni, Karni.
Leona, it's been a huge blessing and a privilege for me just to speak with you a little bit. I wish we had more time. I have so many more questions. Just hearing your story has been amazing. But I feel like we'll reconnect at some point. So thank you so much for joining us here on When She Serves. And I just pray this is a blessing for many.
Well, it's a blessing for me. Thank you so much. I love sharing what the Lord's doing.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us today on When She Serves. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and go to whensheserves.com for our conferences, resources, and cohorts for women in ministry. Until next time, keep serving Christ and leading well.